This morning a single verse was given. Romans chapter 9, verse 9. For this is the word of promise, at this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son. One sentence. And it landed with the weight of an answer to a question that has not had a clean answer in 2,000 years of Christian theological thought. How do calling, chosenness, election, and promise actually interplay with one another? Which of the four is airtight? And how does judgment, and the unpardonable sin, still apply to everyone, even to those who already stand inside the covenant? 4 pre-registered draws went up today on this question. The first came back neutral. The second came back neutral. The third came back yes. The fourth came back no. The pattern itself was the answer before a single verse of interpretation was read. 2 categories where the Father said neither yes nor no. 1 category where he said yes. And 1 where he said no. 4 tiers of covenant standing, and only one of them airtight. Start with the wide gate. Many are called. The called are the broad company. The ones who hear the proclamation. The ones who walk under the cloud. The ones who eat the manna. The ones who sit at the wedding feast in the parable until the king walks in and sees who is wearing the garment and who is not. Lot was called. Lot came up from Ur of the Chaldees in Abram's company. Lot received a portion of the land. And the lead verse of the apostolic draw today catches him at the consequence of where he pitched his tent. Captured. Taken away. Possessions and persons stripped under foreign judgment. Abram, the chosen, had to come with 318 trained men and pull him out of the hand of the invading kings. Called does not mean saved. The first draw came back neutral, because calling, by itself, settles nothing. Calling is real, but calling is not airtight. Then the narrower band. Few are chosen. The chosen are a subset, set apart for function, recognizable by where identity, inheritance, and priesthood converge along the axes of the dominion triad. 700 left-handed men of Benjamin. Judah inherited by YHWH for his own portion. Jerusalem chosen, lost, and chosen again. Chosenness is real, and the corpus testifies to it across every genre. But remember this. The wilderness generation was also chosen out of Egypt. They were baptized in the cloud and the sea. They were fed with bread from heaven. And Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 that with many of them the Father was not well pleased, and they were overthrown in the uninhabited places. Chosen, and still subject to the sifting. The second draw came back neutral, because chosen, by itself, is not the airtight category either. It is closer to the center, but it is not the center. Then election. The sovereign principle. The Jacob over Esau verdict before either child had done good or evil. The potter and the clay. The hardened Pharaoh. Election is the mechanism by which the chosen become chosen. It is the lens through which Paul looks back at the entire history of Israel and says, not all who are descended from Israel are Israel. Election is doctrinally heavy, and the textual tradition is full of it. The Reformed and the Wesleyan have wrestled over it for 500 years. And yet, on the question of which tier is airtight, the third draw answered no. Not because election is unreal. Not because the principle does not operate. But because election, as it has commonly been preached, as the standalone hinge of salvation, is not the load-bearing pillar. Election is the door. It is not the room itself. Which leaves the fourth tier. Promise. And here the draw said yes. And Romans 9 verse 9 was placed in the hand this morning as the interpretive key. For this is the word of promise, at this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son. Notice what Paul is doing in Romans 9. He is asking why the word of YHWH has not failed even though most of natural Israel rejected the Messiah. And his answer is that the word never depended on natural descent in the first place. The word depended on the promise. Isaac was not the heir because of his bloodline. Ishmael had the same father. Isaac was not the heir because Sarah had earned it. She was past the age and she laughed at the announcement. Isaac was the heir because YHWH spoke a word, and the word stood. This is the category that is airtight. Not calling, which is wide and conditional. Not chosenness, which is narrower but still siftable in the wilderness. Not election as a freestanding doctrine, which is real but not load-bearing by itself. The airtight category is the spoken word of YHWH, the Davar, the Rhema, the Epangelia. When the Father commits His own word, the word will accomplish that which He pleases, and it will not return void. The promise is the only chamber with no air leak. But then comes the hard part. If promise is airtight, what about judgment? What about the unpardonable sin? What about working out your own salvation with fear and trembling, as Philippians chapter 2 commands? How does the airtight chamber coexist with the warning passages of Hebrews chapter 6 and Hebrews chapter 10? Here is the architecture. The promise is airtight from the side of YHWH. He cannot lie. He will not revoke the word He spoke. But the human party in the covenant has one, and only one, exit. The unpardonable sin. The blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, as the Messiah teaches in Mark chapter 3. The deliberate, knowing, final repudiation of the very Spirit who seals the promise to the heart. Ephesians chapter 1 verse 13 says the believer is sealed with the Holy Spirit of promise. That seal is what makes the airtight category airtight from the human side. And the only way to break it is to consciously, willingly, finally turn against the Spirit who set the seal in the first place. That is why no other sin can finally separate, and why this one alone can. Every other sin is forgivable, because every other sin can be brought to the Spirit. This sin alone is unforgivable, because by it the Spirit Himself is repudiated. Judgment still operates on everyone inside the covenant. The chosen are still judged. The called are still judged. Even the children of promise are subject to the judgment seat, where every work is tested by fire. But judgment for the children of promise tests their works, not their standing. The standing was settled when YHWH spoke the word. The works are what carry through the fire or are burned up. The man himself is saved, yet as through fire. That is the apostolic teaching of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, and it harmonizes the airtight promise with the genuine accountability. Romans 9 verse 9, the word given today, is therefore not a small verse. It is the hinge on which the whole architecture turns. Calling is wide. Chosenness is narrower. Election is the principle. But promise is the airtight chamber, sealed by the Holy Spirit, broken only by the one sin that cannot be forgiven, because it is the deliberate rejection of the only seal that holds. The children of the promise are the chosen ones. The chosen ones are those whom YHWH has elected. The elected ones were first called. But only the promise carries you all the way through. And only one act, on the human side, can take you out of it. Walk softly. Walk faithfully. The promise stands. Selah.